Well, welcome to the Leadership Lounge. It's great to have you here with us again this month. And I am delighted again to have Anna Hennell-James back with us. So it's lovely to have you with us, Anna.
Pleasure as always, Colin.
Yeah, thank you for joining us. So guests will know that you are a former CEO of an academy trust. You're now retired and you're a good friend of mine. Yeah. So it's lovely to have you back here. Our topic this month that we're going to discuss it came out of actually a contact of mine who contacted me and said, actually, can we talk about, and it's about delegation. And I thought, actually, well, although it's quite a plain, normal topic, I thought it was a really good one for us to explore in the Leadership Lounge, because it's not often something I hear people really talk about. So I thought we could talk about deliberate delegation.
Yeah, and avoiding the pitfalls.
Yeah, so we thought we could cover that tonight. So what I want our listeners to understand, Anna, is this really the key components that if you're planning to delegate, and there's a key thing there, plan to delegate, not just dump.
Always helps.
Yeah. What kind of mindsets you need as the delegator, but also what key things you need to kind of put in before, during and after. So I want our kind of listeners to explore that with us today. So let's delve straight in, shall we? First question for you, Anna. Simple one. What is delegation?
I think to my mind, the big thing about delegation is the making effective use of resources, particularly time. That's not to say that you should only use delegation when you feel you're up against it and you need to offload something, because it also provides really good opportunities for development for other people within your team or your workforce, and for them to practice skills. And if you get it right, and you delegate properly, it can really make people feel that they're included and part of the bigger organisation, rather than they're just sat in their little spot doing what they do day in, day out.
Yeah. So what I'm putting out here is it's the little phrase I added to the word delegation at the beginning, that it's deliberate, isn't it?
Yes.
And there's a sense of really thinking about what time have you got, what people have you got, and beginning that process of being quite strategic and purposeful about it. And it's not just dumping a job on somebody. No. So, in one sense, I've given one thing there, what it's not. But what anything else that you think it's not?
I mean, it is absolutely not dumping on someone, and that is the quickest way to, to annoy people and to put them off, and to potentially then hinder that person's development. So, absolutely no dumping.
Yeah.
It's also not about avoiding things that you don't like doing. I think, well, I don't really like that, so you can do that bit. And it should never be a situation where somebody else does all the work for you and then you take the glory, because that's not right and it's not fair.
No,
absolutely. So it shouldn't be that at all.
Yeah. So it's an interesting one I want to pull out a bit from you there, is where you said it's not about dumping the jobs on people that you really don't like, but just for our listeners to kind of understand that a bit, I'm wondering around, if I'm not skilled at something and probably therefore I don't like it, how does that fit? Is it okay to think that person, e.g. you're more skilled at this, so you will be better placed? Is that okay for delegation?
Yeah, absolutely. Delegating is about looking at the job that needs to be done, looking at the people around the table and going, who has got the best skill set, the best experience, the best understanding of this specialist field to take it on. And then it's around having those discussions with that person, not just going, well, I nominate you because you've done it before. It's about deliberately going through the process of setting it up so that particular piece of work will be delegated to the person best suited to do it. But I would put a rider on that and say, if that person that you've decided has got the skill set that you need is very junior in your organisation, is potentially being paid at a much lower rate than other people around the table, you need to think about that, because you're then possibly creeping into taking advantage of people.
Yeah.
So it's a good opportunity for development for them, but you need to be thinking about, if I'm asking them to do it, what are they going to be getting out of it?
Yeah. Yeah, that's really interesting. Probably not something that people necessarily think about in terms of delegation. And that just led me to think as well, as you were talking about, if you're picking somebody that you know is good at it, sometimes in delegation, there can be a tendency for the leader to go, that person I know is good at it, and we'll say yes. And so we therefore always ask them. So if I'm honest, I can reflect on someone, and if she's listening to this, she'll recognise herself. That when I worked at my last school, there was someone called Gemma. She was brilliant, really good at her job, was so lovely, so accommodating. Everybody loved Gemma. And therefore, it's very easy to keep asking Gemma, and therefore Gemma has the potential of being overloaded. So when we're delegating, it's thinking about their capacity, but also thinking about not overloading somebody as well,
and
isn't
not pigeonholing that person into a particular role. So you're the person that always does that thing, because they might not want to always be doing it. And actually, you want to make sure you have a range of people within your team that could tackle that. If your lovely Gemma has moved on to pastures new, you don't want to find yourself stuck with some tasks that nobody else is able to take on.
So think about the spread and ensuring you're spreading the capability within your team. And actually, if you've got someone that's really good at it, like Gemma, get somebody to work alongside her.
So she's developing somebody else as well.
Great. So We've hinted on this word already around strategic, and we've talked about there can be a tendency to want to dump jobs. How can we really think about it strategically? We've mentioned one or two things, but let's crystallise that for our listeners.
Yeah, I think it's looking at skill sets, being aware of people's strengths and what their areas for development are, because delegation can be an opportunity for development of something. You don't always have to play to somebody's strengths. You can use it as an opportunity to start to build, other strings to their bow, so to speak. It's thinking about the experiences they've had. So, you might, I don't know, supposing you've got a visitor coming to your organisation, you might delegate the giving the guided tour to somebody, but you need to think about, do they know enough about the organisation to do it? Are they comfortable and confident with people that they don't know? And maybe if it's quite a senior person coming, is that person going to be confident enough to do that? And have they had any experiences before which would either support them taking on that role, and you think they'll be okay with it, or potentially where it didn't go well, and if you say, so-and-so's coming, could you show them round? They're going to be absolutely terrified because last time they did it, it went badly wrong. So it's knowing your people, knowing what it's appropriate and acceptable to ask them to do, knowing what they might need support with. And then also thinking about if they do take this on and they develop these skills, how's that going to contribute to the organisation? How's it going to contribute to their development? And actually, is giving them this opportunity something that's going to help me keep them? Because often using delegation to people is a way of keeping them within an organisation, because you are giving them further opportunities. So, but how do you see it, Colin? That's my sort of little jumbled run through of it.
Well, it's interesting. As I was preparing for this topic, I did a quick Google and saw what actually does delegation say. And what I found was delegation is the act of giving someone else the responsibility for a task or project. It can also mean to transfer authority to someone to perform a task in a given situation. So there's an element here where, exactly as you said, you're not just giving somebody the job you don't want, the job you don't like. It's actually thinking, here is something that needs to be done well. Who can I trust, in one sense, to give the authority over this? So it does pull out really what skills do I think they have. So I think your delegation needs to be really planned and purposeful, which we've touched on already, and there's that keyword strategic. So that strategy is a bit of what you've said. What skills is needed in this task, and who have I got in my team that those skills match? What strengths does that person have to bring to that particular project? So when you're delegating, you're really thinking, first of all, what's the outcome I want for my project that I'm going to delegate? What's the end goal got to look like? And therefore, what are the skills and the strengths of the person I need to fulfill that? So there's that strategy there. I think there's also, and again, we've touched on this a little, what's the development opportunities here? So we can think about, there's a job that needs doing, who's the best place to do the job? And that's one level. But if you're thinking about using these delegation opportunities strategically for your organisation, it's saying there's not just a job to be done, but an opportunity here. So it's saying who's best placed to do it, but who could work alongside to really learn from this. So you're building that resilience as a company, which you touched on, for the future in developing people. And it's also about saying, how does this help build my capacity as an organisation, my business capacity in one sense, in terms of developing the people, but also getting the job done well so that our organisation, really fulfills and goes beyond what we can fulfil. And you're kind of getting your breadth as an organisation in what you deliver. So it's just asking key questions: who's best placed for skills, who would it be good to develop, and how will this give capacity for our business by delegating it, either freeing you up to then do your role well, or being able to widen what you kind of offer. So I think what I want our listeners to understand is delegation's a real opportunity, yes, to get the job done, but to grow and develop your people. That's the bit I would add to it. So, Anna, we've just looked at what delegation is. So now what I want to take our listeners through is almost the sort of before, during and after, so that we almost give a recipe for people to work through. So before we actually delegate a task, we've touched on this a little, but before we delegate a task, what should we be considering if we're doing that delegation?
I think the key thing is whether the person you're looking to delegate to has got the time, the capacity to do it. And we will all know lots of people like your lovely Gemma that will just, be incredibly helpful and always say yes. But what you don't want to be doing is putting undue pressure on somebody who feels, well, I've got to say yes, but how on earth am I going to get that done as well as everything else that's already on my desk? So it's about you being mindful of their workload and actually having that conversation with them. Don't make any assumptions about it. And then looking at we've already talked about who's got the skill set, who's best placed to do it. Doesn't mean they have to have all the skills, but it's thinking about, if I do delegate this to them, which bits might they need help with? And do either I, as the leader, or other people have the capacity to put that help in? Because if you're delegating because of lack of capacity, just moving the problem, further around the table doesn't solve it, because there will be that knock-on effect of people, trying to help as well as do what they do. Everybody just gets overwhelmed. You haven't increased the capacity at all if you're just passing the buck, really. And I think the other key thing to think about is how you will communicate. You can't just go, if you could do that, that'd be great, thank you very much, and close the office door. That's the last they see of you. It's about how that communication's going to happen, both how you're going to communicate with them, and equally how that's going to be communicated to the rest of the team. Because earlier on, when you were talking about the definition of delegation, one of the words that came up was authority, and giving that authority to somebody else. So it's also thinking about, if I delegate this task to that person, how are the rest of the team going to do that? Particularly if it's quite a significant piece of work. How do I communicate it in a way that the rest of the team accept that this person has been given the authority to do it, and they're almost like acting on my behalf? Because what you don't want is to delegate it to somebody and everybody else goes, well, you needn't think I'm helping because, what makes you think you're entitled to be doing this kind of this
I
kind
really
of
like
task.
that piece there, and about authority, in terms of what authority do they have, but also being really clear to other people about that, but also what authority others have in this in terms of and how the jigsaws together. So really thinking about how you're going to communicate that to each other.
Yeah, and share it.
Yeah,
more
and also
widely.
I think where the authority stops as well, because and where there needs to be referral points. If you get that really clear, then it actually makes it better for everybody.
It just makes it easier for everybody. Yeah. So what do you think are the key things we should plan then, Colin?
Well, you've mentioned a number of them, but I like to either alliterate or have some key things. Yeah. Well, I've got what have I got? 6 W's actually. Oh. So the first is the why. So being really clear on your reason why this is important, kind of who it impacts, so that when you're going to give this delegation, that people really understand the importance of the project and the reason why it's important. Second one is the what. So you've mentioned this one, really clear on the task that needs doing. So you get clarity yourself. So you need to be clear in order to get others clear. What is it actually needs doing? What should it look like by the end of it? What are the key kind of components to it? Then thinking about who is best placed. We touched on this a number of times. For example, you've mentioned about the time. It's also about the skills that are needed for this. So you're really thinking clearly about that. But also, as we mentioned earlier, who could be good to develop in this? Yeah. So you're not just thinking about who you're going to give the lead to, but who might shadow so it develop them. But also, if you're giving it to somebody that actually I think they've got the capacity here, they're not quite ready really, but they've got most of it, then the other part of the who there is who will I get to mentor them? So if we think this is a great opportunity for Belinda, but Belinda's, new to this, then we think about who's, the Bertha that we might put alongside Belinda in order to help, and we're thinking about that mentoring so that we create that safety net, so we use that as a growth opportunity as well as a delivery opportunity. Then you've got the what will they need to help them as well. So we've already had what the project is, but what will they need to make this be successful. And then the when, the dates that you want it done by, the timing, you really plan in those moments for checkpoints as well, just so that you and them can be reassured, but also if the project isn't quite coming into land, you know about it earlier and can do something about it and support them. But also, one thing I regularly talk to people about is buffer times. So when you've set that end date, you're not leaving it as the end date that it actually has got to go live to the world on, because if it's going a bit wrong, you've got no capacity to support it. So those would be some of the W's that I would say, all based around those kind of questions. Yeah.
And when we're getting ready to delegate and you're thinking about all those things, what about our mindset? What should we be thinking prior?
Yeah, I think that's really important for us as leaders to be thinking about our thinking, because with something like delegation, there are things that we might be going through ourselves in terms of we've said earlier, we're handing over authority. So there could be a sense for some of us of, it might feel a little bit scary because we no longer hold all of it tightly. So I think there's some kind of almost what are we thinking? So what are we thinking about the task? How do we feel about it? To be double checking ourselves, am I just dumping this? Or am I using this as a strategic opportunity? So just to be checking and balancing. What am I thinking about myself in this, in terms of how am I feeling about delegating? What are the tensions I'm feeling? And to be able to think, okay, so if I'm feeling this, how do I manage this during the project so that I don't micromanage them, but so I also don't just leave it alone.
Don't abandon them.
Yeah, and also what am I thinking about them? What's my view of this person, to be really reflecting on my attitude towards them. Am I confident? If I'm not confident, what are my reasons for not being confident? What do I then put in place then to help my confidence, but most importantly to help them? So I think it's almost just thinking about our thinking. What do I think about myself, the task, and them, and just be reflecting, if that's how I feel, where's it coming from, and how do I manage it so that I can be the best version of myself in supporting them in this delegation. So that's what I'd say about the mindset, really. Okay, so we've had some thought beforehand, haven't we, about, really got to plan this delegation carefully, and now we're at delegation. So we've done all the planning, and now we're going to come and talk to them. So we've talked to this about some of these W's, about my why, the reason for it, the what, the task we're going to do, the when, the timings. How do we now translate that, Anna, into the delegation meeting, this first session you're going to have with Belinda to talk to her about this role you want her to lead on?
I think when you have that meeting, the key word for me in all of that would be being honest and realistic. Don't overdress the opportunity. I think we've probably all experienced times when there's been a suggestion that, if you do this particular task, then, the next promotion's even closer and there'll be all these wonderful things open up to you, when actually it might just be, we just need to get this piece of work done. So don't make it something it isn't. Be honest about, the development opportunities, what it might bring, but don't pretend it's going to be like the
I think that's really important, because as you were describing that, I'm just feeling that feels manipulative, doesn't it? If we're giving them false hope as to this will get you your next promotion.
And I think it's important as well that when you have that initial discussion, there is the opportunity and the option for them to say no. That might need to lead to further discussion, but I don't think it would be fair to say, there is this task and I'm delegating it to you, end of.
So you're talking about a real partnership with them then, an exploration. This is what I think, what do you think?
I believe you can do this. How do you feel about that? And then that gives you the opportunity to be asking as well, ask them what they feel they might need. So it is that open, honest relationship and discussion. And your communication just needs to be really, really clear. If this is a priority for the organisation and a lot rests on it, they need to know that before they go, okay, I'll do that. Don't go telling them afterwards, by the way, if this doesn't go well, we might all be losing our jobs. That's not fair. So it's about that real clarity, honesty, partnership, I would say, in that.
So clarity is kindness here, isn't it? Both clarity around all the things we've talked about, what it is, the reason for it, the timings, so that they understand the magnitude, so that they can feel confident in it. And then that, as you say, that joint exploration with them.
And you've mentioned timings, which are key to something, because there will be a deadline by which it needs to be done. So how do you think we really ensure that we stick to a time frame?
Well, I think it's about really mapping it out clearly, isn't it? And doing that collaboratively with the person. I know in certain industries they have the Gantt chart, which maps out. Those of us who've done building works know, that Gantt chart, and you map what has to be done by when. So I think you map that out really clearly. I think having like we've said this earlier, an end point but with buffer. So if this has got to be done by the 30th, that actually you say our end point's the 23rd, because you've then got that week for mop up, obviously depending on the size of your project. But also it's no good waiting to the 23rd. So it's having some clear marker points and review points when you'll do that. And I think also discussing with people what is kind of expected by those review points, so that you're almost mapping the project back. So if I give you a sort of literally an illustration of this, so recently it was my in-law's 60th anniversary, and so we commissioned with an artist friend of ours a line drawing for them of their pet, which we knew they'd love, which they did, fortunately, when it was presented to them. But what was really interesting is the artist, as she did it, sent some pictures to my wife of the various stages during it. So actually, if we were to work backwards now and go, here's the end picture, but look, week 1 it was here, week 4 it was here, week 6 it was here. And you can clearly see what the picture looked like. I think we need to do the same for when we're planning a project. That as well as giving the time frame, we'll review at week 2 and week 4, and then we'll deliver here on week 6, and the actual final point is week 7. That we paint paint the picture literally as by week 2, this is where I'd want us to be. By week 4, this is where we'd need to be. So that it's really clear on the expectation at those points. So that a bit like a chart, Gantt chart, you know by this week this will have got to this point. And if you haven't, you can then begin to say, okay, so are we just going to not hit the target by week 6, or actually what do we need to accelerate then in order to get back on
to catch up
by week 4?
And what's getting in the way of us
where we need what's
to be.
Been the obstacle, and therefore what do we do about it? So I think it's about clearly mapping the time out, mapping the expectations along that, and I'd almost, to use a primary school phrase, show and tell, that actually at this point I want you to show me where you're at, and we can then compare it with the picture we said we'd look like at that point. So I think those are things that are really key.
That's really helpful.
So, Anna, one of the worries for a lot of leaders that I work with is that they worry that they're putting more pressure on colleagues. You touched on this earlier on, and I think a lot of leaders are kind. We might see some leaders in our world at the moment that aren't, but a lot of leaders are. And so they feel bad that I'm going to be giving somebody more work. So I often, in coaching, talk through this kind of phrase, do you have the capacity to help me with this task? What do you think about that approach?
I think definitely asking about capacity is a good thing to do, rather than making assumptions or just telling somebody they're doing it. But also I think it comes back to that idea of things being a development opportunity. And if, as we say, you're honest about it, you don't overinflate it. But if you say to somebody, this would be a development opportunity for you if you choose to take it on, I will be able to provide some extra support, or Belinda, Bertha will be working alongside you. Are you interested? Because I think you would generally find that people are willing to do some extra if it's developing their skills, or enabling them to do something that they haven't had the opportunity to do before. So maybe it's an opportunity for them to see if they like that particular, I don't know, pulling together a Gantt chart, doing something, running a program, doing a presentation, if they haven't had the opportunity before. So if you are putting it like that, this is a development opportunity, are you interested? Right? You're interested, great. Do you have the capacity to do this?
So I like that, how you've clarified interest first, then capacity. I as I'm listening to you talking there, I'm also thinking about, which is something really strong for me, people's passionate purpose. So you've thought really carefully about, does this fit something that really drives, excites them? You touched on that, actually. Are they into doing charts to map out the process, all the rest of it? So there's that sense of, it fits your purpose, are you interested? And if it doesn't really fit their purpose, we probably shouldn't be asking them. And then to ask about the capacity. I like those two aspects. Sometimes after delegation, this is an experience I've had, and they were working on the task, we wondered, did I make it clear? So we've delegated, and seemingly, we thought we'd made it all quite clear to them, but they don't really seem to be on it, and doesn't seem to be heading right. I guess there's twofold question here. One, how do we now make it head right? How do we ensure that it now repairs and gets on track? But there's also, if we recognise this, how do we really ensure people clearly understand the task? I know we've touched on some of that, but any other thoughts on that?
I think it can be as simple as asking them to, repeat back to you, what is it you think you're going to be doing? I've just delegated this task to you. Can you explain to me what it is you think you're going to be doing, what the end product, item, whatever will be, and what are the steps you're going to go through to get there? Because if you've had the discussion, hopefully they will have picked up all of that. But if not, it gives you a chance to to repeat it, to explain further. And I always love a follow-up email. Because then it's in writing and they've got it to refer to. So if they are having a moment when it was, I think this is what Colin wanted, but I'm not sure. Rather than having to come to you and go, I can't remember, they've got something they can look back on and go, I have got this right. Or actually, I'm not sure. I need to go and clarify that further.
Yeah, I like that. We sometimes seem to think that when we put something in email, it's because you've been very naughty and I'm putting this to catch you and tell you off later on.
No,
but actually it's not, is it? It's helpful.
Helpfulness. And I think the other thing to do with email is you can copy in other people who need to know, because you may have had that conversation with Belinda and asked her to do this. So if she's then busy doing it and somebody who knows she doesn't want people going, why are you doing that? That's not your job.
Yeah.
So if you have communicated that to the wider team, so people know, oh, Belinda's doing that because Colin's asked her to, take responsibility for this.
Yeah.
So that's where email can be really purposeful and helpful and help to clarify and remind and gives people a reference point to go back to.
Yeah. I want to pick up as well on that first one you mentioned about getting them to repeat it back. I mean, it did remind me of my days as a teacher, where if you had a child you knew struggled to get it right, you would get them to repeat it back. But the reason behind that, and it's the same with working with adults, is to check, are you clear? Because if they repeat it back and they've missed bits, that then helps you understand what bits have they got, what bits have they not, so you can address the bits they've not understood. Otherwise, you could just pile in with the whole lot, and then they start to switch off because I know all of this, and then they miss the bit again that you really need them to understand. So getting them to repeat back what they're clear on enables you to spot the gap and then speak into that gap. So again, really love that suggestion.
And I think sometimes, Colin, that when we are passing over a lot of information which we have probably been thinking about for a while, we can genuinely believe we included something.
Yes.
And if it was recorded and you'd find you'd missed it.
Yeah.
So asking them to repeat back, and it was you to go, oh, and I clearly forgot to mention that bit. So, And what about any other tips for helping them really get on with the task, Colin?
Yeah, so I think the repeating back is a great one. That's one I really like. Modelling aspects of the expectation. So showing them examples of what it should look like. I think now, obviously, if they're doing a new project that's brand new, it's perhaps really hard. So in that case, it literally might be a sketching out of what you want it to look like. But where you've got other models, other examples, so that it gives them something concrete to visualise, because I think a lot of people are visual. So to see something visual, look, by this stage it should look like this, and you give some examples. I think that's really important. I think the other bit that can help, particularly if you thought somebody understood it, thought they were capable, then you're finding out they're not. Now, we need to hold this in balance with not micromanaging, but I think we can then use apprenticing. So apprenticing, as you know, has those stages of I do, you watch, I do, you help, you do, I help, you do, I watch. Great, you're now up to speed with it, off you go. So there's that sense where just for a while we may come and work alongside so that they get the idea, or we delegate somebody else to come and model that we then know that they're confident in doing it. So I think that modelling expectation in showing it physically, what it could look like, modelling it through apprenticing, either you or someone else, again, can help people get on track. But like you were talking earlier, it is about a partnership. So there shouldn't be a sense of, you're not doing this properly, I'm cross with you. It should be, I can see there's a struggle here. Would you like some help? Let me just show you what I wanted this to look like. I could work alongside you for this bit, or I could get Bertha to work alongside you for this bit. Would that be helpful? So that, and you involve them collaboratively in it, I think is really important. So good. Well, we started to move into that during delegation. So let's do a little bit more on that. How do we get the balance right of giving them freedom, but also not so far off that it could be wrong? So right at the beginning you went, here's a job, shut the door and off you go. We probably shouldn't be at that stage. So how do we get that balance right?
I think the key to that is managing ourselves, because as leaders, delegating and letting go can be incredibly hard. And we have to believe it ourselves when we say to them that we're confident they can do this task. It's no good saying to them, I absolutely think you can do this, and then sitting in your office going, well, I'm not sure they can, because if that's the case, you've delegated to the wrong person. So it's having that faith and confidence that you've made the right choice, and that will come down to not second guessing yourself, accepting that not everybody will do something the way you would.
Yes.
So when you see them doing it in a different way, not jumping to the conclusion that, oh, this is going to be a complete car crash, they haven't understood, it's not right. They may just be approaching it differently. They will still get to the same outcome.
Yeah, so I think that is about the broad, we paint in one sense the expectation around broad brushstrokes, but the style of art or whatever that they're going to bring to it is down to them. Yeah.
And it has to be, and that's kind of why you chose them in the first place, because what you want is what they are going to bring to that task. You're not looking for somebody to be a little clone of you.
Absolutely. And if I might pick up on that first bit where you talked about your belief in them. So in coaching, we have the phrase unconditional positive regard, that I believe unconditionally that you have the capacity to do this. And if we don't have that for the person, then we shouldn't be asking
them to do it.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And there is a sense that when we show that, it can fuel them, because our belief in them then stimulates belief in themselves. So that is really important during it. Yeah. And how do we also avoid, we mentioned this word earlier, avoid becoming the micromanager? And you touched on that a little in terms of we need to allow them to do their style of art almost in the way that they're delivering it. They're not clones of us. But how do we, because we've talked about mapping out timings, we've talked about expectations, but how do we stop the rev counter going into the red on that and becoming micromanagers?
I think if you have those planned in feedback points, or if we go back to the Gantt chart, the deadlines by which different stages of the project will be completed, and you are building in time for regular updates, and that can't be a snatched conversation in a corridor. It needs to be in the diary that to start with, maybe more frequently, because if things are going a bit astray, you don't want them to go so far off course. So maybe every couple of days there's a touch point, just 15 minutes where we've got it in the diary. We're going to sit down and just check, is it on track? Anything you need? Have you got access to the resources you need to do this? Is it going okay? So you've got those planned in. You can spread them out the further down the line it goes. But if it's in the diary, you've got the opportunity to have that sort of feedback loop with them. And also be available to them if they want to come to you. You can have the dates in, but don't have a closed door. If somebody wants to come to you and say, actually, I'm struggling with this bit, you can't be going, well, you're doing it. You need to make sure you've got the capacity to have those, maybe more informal chats and discussions about any little sticking points.
Yeah, I like that. And I almost got this image as you're mapping out the timing. It's almost exponential. First, I'm going to meet you off today, then I'll meet you after 2, then I'll meet you after 4. I know it doesn't have to be literally that, but you're stretching the time frame out as you do that. And I liked the way that you reiterate you're planning the time in your diary as much as you are in theirs. So that, again, is well away from that dumping the job on them bit. And what you're saying there is that still allows you to keep some sense of control because we need to feel confident around that. But so you're fueling yourself slightly, but you're not therefore micromanaging. You're still leaving the authority with them as part of that process.
And that's key. But I think, something else to think about, Colin, would be, how do we manage those review meetings when it may or may not be on track, and they may or may not have understood what it was you thought they were going to be doing for you? Yeah.
Well, I think that comes to a number of things we've talked about in terms of when you're planning it beforehand, you're thinking about those review points. So when you hold those meetings, it's like, okay, where did we say we were going to be? And how does that compare? Show and tell, I mentioned earlier, isn't it? Show me where you're at. How does that compare? Either great, okay, there's a gap there. What's contributed to that? What steps are you going to take? So I think the next word for me is curiosity. Just be curious with them around, if we're not on task, what were the barriers that's caused this then? And then another key word, ownership. Okay, so we're not on task because of those barriers. What are you going to do? So again, we're putting that authority on them. We're not moving into the drama triangle of trying to be the rescuer then at this point, but we say, look, and we're going back to that key phrase again, unconditional positive regard that you can do this. So therefore I'm going to ask you what you're going to do to get that back on task by this point. And then another key thing in that meeting you've mentioned before, Ellie, as well, is support. Okay, what support do you need from me or others? But it starts with asking them first, what are you going to do? So we don't come in with the support first, because then we move into rescuer. But there still is a sense that they're not alone, and they shouldn't feel alone in this delegation. So it's saying, okay, great, you're going to do X, Y, and Z. What support do you need from me? What support do you need from others? So that they're then really clear as they leave the meeting on what they're going to do. So again, then at the end of that meeting, you pull all that together. Okay, so we've agreed that you're going to do X and Y, I'm going to do Z, and we will meet again by this date. So at the end of that meeting, there should be that clarification.
That constant communication to make sure that you're both on the same page throughout the whole project, really.
So we've done the before, we've done the at delegation, we've done during, then it comes to a point which I think most people kind of forget, which is after the delegation. There's a sense where the project's finished, woohoo, great, but then what do you do? So once the project's landed, what do you think, Anna, is important for us to do with the person that we've delegated to?
Number one, say thank you. And I'd never cease to be amazed at the number of people who kind of forget to say thank you for something that somebody's done for them. So absolutely thank them, and publicly. You know, if you have a team meeting, Belinda's just brought this project in on time, she's done this. Thank you, Belinda. Well done. You know, great contribution to the organisation. It's good to thank people one-to-one, but there also needs to be some public recognition of what that person has done. And it needs to be really clear who did the work. So if a client comes in and is particularly pleased with the presentation, you go, I'm really impressed. Belinda did this for us. You know, it's not taking any of that glory yourself, but making sure that person can see that what they commit to doing and what they bring to the organisation will be recognised and appreciated, not that somebody else is going to pretend they did it. And I would say sit down and have a review with that person, you know, how was it for you? Really appreciated you taking this on board. Did you enjoy doing it? Is it something you'd like the opportunity to do again? Or having sat and developed this amazing Gantt chart, do you never want to see another one in your life? Because sometimes doing something that's delegated to you, which is a new opportunity, is just as helpful for letting you know what you don't want to be doing as much as finding out what you do want to be sort of spending your time on. So see what they've learned, how it was, get some feedback on how you did. You know, did I give you the right amount of support? Did you feel at any point I was micromanaging you? You've got to be big enough to take the feedback, and hopefully if you've had this open and honest, collaborative relationship during the project, they will feel able to say, actually, there were some points when I felt you were just breathing down my neck the whole time. So you can learn for the next time you delegate as well.
And I think that review is really important. Yes, on how it was for them, what have they learned from it? What have we learned about me? Also, I think what have we learned about the process, the system, the organisation. So actually what helped you, but what were barriers? Let's unpick some of that. I mean, some of that you'll know anyway, but it's really pulling it through by the end of the project, so that actually if there were either colleagues or systems that were unhelpful, that you use that to learn and grow from. So you actually develop the resilience of your whole organisation, don't you? Not just your resilience or their resilience as part of that process.
And then what happens beyond that review, Colin, to, you know, so it doesn't just become this one-off event? What can we do beyond that?
Well, I think some of it's what you've said is that review and learning from it, what worked well, what could have been better. I think that's key. And like we've said, for not just us as individuals, but for the wider process. I think for us as the leaders, it's also about being curious about ourselves. So yes, we may have had some feedback there, and to say, yeah, well, how did that feel for me then, and what was going on for me? So you're actually trying to understand, well, where did that come from then? Yeah, I actually felt really torn or frustrated in those moments. What was it about that situation that led to, what emotion was I feeling, what led to that, what contributed to that, to really understand yourself as part of that process so that you become a better leader as part of that process. I think also it's about saying, okay, so we landed the project, but also to be able to say, was there an even better development I could have used this for? So were there more opportunities for mentoring that perhaps I didn't take up at that point, e.g., yeah, Belinda delivered it, but I could have also had somebody else working alongside her in these points, and actually that would have really helped. But I think it's also seeing, is there anything from this project that we can show and tell again? So actually, if Belinda has developed a really good timeline management process that we hadn't thought of before, it's her own unique design, but actually it really helped land this project efficiently, that we take that forward and we say, actually, Belinda, could you share this? I think this could be a really good thing for us to adopt. So I think it's what do we learn from this? What has somebody produced that maybe could be part of a future system of delegation, that if there was a success here, what contributed to it, and how can I work it forward going ahead? So I think those are the bits. It's just what can we learn from this, and what can we carry forward, both in individuals but also in the systems that came out of it. So time flies in a leadership lounge. We've gone through a whole process of delegation, and hopefully our listeners will be able to understand it's actually have to be strategic, really thinking and planning about the kind of what it is we want done and when we want it done, and who's the best place and who could be mentored or be a mentee in these moments, and really having those key review points as we go through with them and being really open and honest. So hopefully people are coming out of being in the leadership lounge with us really clear, like, oh yeah, it's not just giving someone a job and letting them get on with it, because Belinda's always really good. But what about the top tips? Because we always end up with some top tips. So Anna, have you got up to 3 top tips?
I do, I have 3.
Excellent.
Number 1, most important, self-check. Am I delegating or am I dumping?
Ah, I like that, because it alliterates. Delegating or dumping.
Any hint of dumping, don't do it. Because it's not right, and it won't work. So just have that conversation with yourself.
That's a really good self-reflective question. Is this delegating or is it dumping? And no dumping allowed.
No dumping allowed. Number 2 is clarity. So be clear and precise over exactly what the task that you are delegating is and what the timeframes are. And we've talked about how you can do that, but just make sure you have that clarity in your own mind before you then go into sharing that with the person that you are delegating to. And number 3, when I was thinking about this, what came to mind, this will sound a little strange, but it does make sense, I promise, is stabilisers. When you take the stabilisers off your child's bike, and you do that, you are running along behind, holding onto the saddle. And at some point, you have to let go. You have to let go, and hopefully they wobble off, but they stay upright. They might fall off. You hope they don't, but if they do, you pick them up and you do it again. But at some point, you need to stand back and let them get on with it. So just, if you feel you're slipping into micromanaging, just think about taking the stabilisers off the bike. At some point, you have to let go. Yes, because it's interesting, when you let go, they might completely flourish. It's just, you were saying that reminded me of my youngest daughter when she'd had trouble learning to ride her bike. So when we went camping once, and with the caravan, we unloaded the bike, and we thought, I'm going to be spending most of this weekend with her holding it. Literally, she got out the caravan with the bike, got on it, and I literally let go, and off she went. That was it. We might surprise ourselves, and therefore that point, we've got to take the stabilisers off and take our hand off the saddle and let them go. Let them go.
Brilliant. So some super top tips there, Anna. Thank you ever so much for joining me again on the Leadership Lounge.
You're very welcome.
It's been great to explore this with you. And to our guests, thank you for joining us. I hope you've really enjoyed just really understanding the importance of deliberate delegation. It's been lovely to have you with us, and we look forward to you joining us again next month in the Leadership Lounge.